Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. I'm delighted to be joined by Hugh Maxwell on today's episode. Hugh's had a long and storied career in the realm of safety and worked all around the world. And this conversation is really interesting in terms of it kind of meanders, but we cover some really great, important topics. How's the UK doing on safety versus the rest of the world? What can we learn from people around the rest of the world in safety? What can we learn from the young safety professionals coming into our world, and how can we support them to be better? What are some of the benefits of mentoring? What about technology and much, much more? So there's a lot we get into in the episode. Trust you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side of the credits. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining me today, Hugh.
Christian, absolute pleasure. It's always good. I do enjoy your podcasts. Excuse me, it's nice to get the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's a long time in the making. We've been talking about this for ages, so it's good to finally get it booked in.
Excuse me, yeah, it certainly is. Nothing in view of recent experiences, it's probably a good, valuable time for us to interact.
What do you mean by that?
Well, as well as sharing with you before the fact, I had the international experience across in South Africa. More recently, I spent 3 weeks on an intensive project at the Reliance refinery in India, which again gave me further exposure to some of the challenges that our new and seasoned safety professionals are actually facing out in the field.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things we were going to talk about, isn't it? This kind of overseas piece, because obviously we here in the UK, we're quite highly regulated. We're doing pretty well when it comes to safety, but the picture across the world is quite different, particularly in more developing countries. I mean, how do you see the differences of how people? Let's start with kind of how people perceive safety, or how people feel about safety in some of these other countries versus here in the UK.
I think there's in some respects, I think there's an over-reliance or an over-dependence for them to look at us and think that we are actually the high performer.
Right.
And that's despite the fact, you're looking at last year's stats, 1.8 million people suffered work-related illnesses, 875 people suffering from stress, 75,000 from stress, and 135 people killed in the actual workplace. So whilst we may be looked up to, there's a lot we need to look at ourselves about and try to improve first.
Yeah, and obviously certainly the fatalities went up, didn't it?
Certainly did, yes.
Yeah, much of the data is I always talk about the safety crab. In other words, you're happy going sideways, which seems to be kind of prevailing, rather than what can we do to be diving like a peregrine falcon, which might be a better place to be in.
Very much so. I think this is the great opportunity. I mean, before this talk, we touched on the importance of making best use of AI and technology. And for me, we are going to have this revolution rather than just sitting with this norm, this, as I said, this sort of stagnation where we're quite plateaued in terms of our fatality performance. I think the other danger is a lot more now, as I said to you about stress and work-related illnesses like this, mental illnesses. These are much more coming to the fore and being recognised. And my concern is the fact that this is going to dilute our focus on trying to reduce these fatalities. It's very important we can put them up there on, under the spotlight and attend to them, but we mustn't lose focus on the fact we're still killing an unacceptable high level of people. And one of the things about us is we are much more transparent than many of these other countries and companies. I know from previous experiences overseas, not mentioning any countries, but 20 years ago, it very much was internationally. Many countries were actually trying to manipulate or massage the figures.
Right.
For example, when I first went to China in the early 2000s, the reporting criteria in mining alone, if somebody was killed, I think you didn't have to report to the government unless there were more than 4 deaths in a mine, in any mine incident. So what used to happen is, because many of the mines were privately owned, what you would do, and they're owned by family, you would say, okay, then I'll declare that 1 person was killed in my mine, 2 in yours, 1 in somebody else. So if the figure was 6, then actually hide the true extent of it within the mine, try and take the focus off themselves. And in many respects, I do honestly think that there's not transparency, there's not honest reporting going around the world.
Yeah, because one of the things that I often worry about is, if we have massive underreporting of near misses and so on here, but we do have the regulations around RIDDOR and stuff, so actually we kind of have a good sense of the more serious end of things, what is actually happening. But yes, across the world, how accurate is this data? Are we looking at actually a much bigger problem than the data suggests, even though the data, if you look globally, is really quite concerning?
Well, having been in safety for a long time, like yourself, I know that people report what they want to report. People report what people want them to see. So the big danger is, if you've gone 6 million working hours without a fatality, without lost time injury, there's an inherent bias internally. Nobody wants to be the one to break that. So typically they look for every way possible, every means possible, to avoid being the one who breaks the trend. So it may be getting people back to work on restricted duties, or trying to bend the rules sometimes. Whereas in my opinion, it'd be much better putting that energy into trying to prevent these accidents, share lessons learned, and being totally transparent. The problem is, if we keep painting a positive picture and sort of painting over or hiding the cracks, we're never going to improve. We learn more from our mistakes. We learn more from the little things we get wrong by acting and reacting than we'll ever learn by keep patting ourselves on the back and getting ourselves into this false sense of security.
So thinking about some of these other countries then, there are obviously some challenges as there are here. What would you say are some of the things that, looking outwards from the UK, we could maybe learn from some of these other countries and cultures where they're doing things perhaps differently that may be better from us, or something we can draw some insights from?
Well, one of the things I've noticed, particularly in my time in Africa and also in India, is how hungry, and I mean hungry, in more than one context, some of the young and aspiring safety professionals are. And in particular, a lot of the higher risk industries like mining, like chemicals, oil and gas, they're very much male dominated. So if you're going to be a strong character, strong safety leader, it's particularly difficult. And if you want to be a standout as a female, you have to be better than the best. You have to be better than the worst male in many cases. So I think one of the things that we've possibly, I wouldn't say lost for the wrong reason, I think we've developed some area of complacency, because yes, we are a lot better than most. We're not perfect, but we're a lot better than most. We've got to try and get this inherent hunger back, not just the professionals. It's got to be everybody running into this. We should all be coming to work to try and protect our brother, protect our sister, because ultimately nobody comes to work to get hurt, and we've all got a part to play in this process. I think get this hunger back. Again, I think, I don't know if it's a stiff upper British lip approach or what, but there's still this stigma, if we lose face, if we have to identify when things are wrong, that it goes against us. To some degree, some places are blame culture, or an underlying blame culture. We've got to try and remove this altogether. We've got to try and create psychological safety as it is meant to be at all levels in all businesses, both vertically and horizontally throughout businesses. It's not about competing. It's not about hiding. It's not about preventing the bad news getting to people. We've talked to you before about what people refer to as the iceberg of ignorance, which I think it's a crude term, but basically what it means is that we get a false perception at the top of what's actually really going on to the organisation, because we're busy dealing with and providing information, KPIs and other things to us key stakeholders who may be shareholders, there may be external agencies, there may be the government. Whereas if we were actually able to get deeper and take a deeper dive within our own business, we'd see what's really going on at grassroots and try and understand the fact that whilst we have our perception of the way work is imagined, how work is actually done doesn't always convert to that. And it's really important we get underneath this and able to work with the people and understand in reality what are the barriers for us to be able to achieve this, and what are the things that we need to enable to make sure that the workplace is as safe as possible. And that's whether in a highly regulated, highly process orientated environment, or one which is highly manual in nature.
Yeah. So the end of your answer there was about, what some of the things are that the safety professional can do, ask those questions, build those relationships, etc. But if we take a step back from that in terms of, and think about the kind of causation of this challenge, is that something that you feel is a issue with how the safety profession explains its value or deals with its colleagues and senior management teams, or is there something that's kind of beyond the scope of what we can do to influence the change?
I think myself, it's important that safety is seen as being much broader than the role of the safety professional. A lot of organisations are still at that level of safety maturity where it's seen as a policing or a conforming role. We want to try and move away from that. We want to make it much more flexible. We want to make much more engagement. We want people to feel that safety is actually there as an enabler to do the job safely, to the required quality, in the right time, at the right price. We don't want people to see safety as a barrier. Still too often when I'm mentoring and coaching people, not just in the UK, but elsewhere internationally, people got this false perception that good safety costs. It doesn't. Bad safety costs. Usually tenfold or even 100-fold more, depending on how bad you allow that safety to deteriorate to. So I think the important thing is that people bite the bullet. We get the senior management involvement and engagement. Some companies are out there getting it right. A lot of companies want to get it right, but I think particularly since COVID as well, there's been a lot of changes in business. A lot of people and a lot of organizations have restructured. People are moving into new roles where they haven't necessarily had that level of training or coaching and mentoring, which is, again, another important part, I think, still in the UK. I think we need to develop. I'm a big believer in my brother's keeper, as you know. I'm a big believer that caring, sharing, and vice versa. So, I mentor a lot of people at different stages of their careers. And in turn, I get as much out of that mentoring by learning their expectations, their hopes, their beliefs, their values. And I try to adopt my approach to encompass that so that they can walk out of here a better leader with a much more balanced view. Because the standard in the workforce now, I was doing the talk last year in Kuala Lumpur, and one of the things that came to light was 40% of the workforce by 2025 are going to actually be something like, I think they're going to be millennials. So there's going to be a big influence on what their expectations are in terms of how long they want to stay with businesses, what the business give them in terms of values, in terms of beliefs. And that's changed a lot since my day when I started working here in the 1980s, where, very much relied on your management. You came to work, you did your job, you didn't necessarily think how you could improve it as much as they do now. But with the onset of things like, basically top quality management, lean principles, a lot of modern manufacturing technologies, we've got the opportunity to take things to even greater heights if we can all learn and share from each other what our expectations are.
Yeah, lots and lots to unpack there, which is great. If we go back to thinking about safety leadership, how would you define that? Question one, and then where would you see that? And we're speaking in generalizations, but where you've experienced the biggest kind of room for improvement, whether that's through your experience working with different companies or some of your mentoring, whatever it might be, in order to drive that change, drive that influence, so that we do see safety as an investment rather than a cost.
We typically promote people, businesses. For example, a lot of the high risk industry I've worked in, we promote people based on technical competence, not necessarily based on having the people skills or the leadership skills we want to take the business to the next levels. The type of leader we need to try to develop are the ones who have the people skills, the ones who can get the best out of others, not just out of themselves, the ones that are able to align their approach and the culture of the business based on the mission, the values, and the vision that company has, and basically try to use that to adopt and develop their own unique culture to address that. And culture change is a massive topic in its own right, as you know. But by having these visionary leaders who actually understand and recognise the fact that they're there to get the best out of other people, and in particular on the safety front, that means protecting people at all levels of the business, both physically and mentally as well. So I think there's a big opportunity for us to develop these leaders so that they themselves are actually not necessarily 100% focused on KPI, but a lot more people-centric in their approach, so that they're actually utilising and building their belief in other people to make them much stronger in how they perform at work. Because no one person is an island. They can't do it all themselves, and that's why we have these specialists. And for me, the truly great leaders are the ones who are able to delegate this and recognise this, that their people are the true value, and they can't be, the wear of the crown for everything.
Yeah, no, fully agree with you there. Are there any particular resources, Hugh, or books or podcasts or anything like that on sort of broader leadership that you think would be beneficial for people to have a read of or a listen of or watch of or anything like that?
There's a lot out there. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and I don't think the problem is with this thing. No one size fits all.
Yeah.
One of the great things about leadership is that different people have different perceptions and coming from different backgrounds. Stephen Covey for me, great read, really great. I'm a big believer in getting back to basics, keep it simple as possible, and then take the messages or the key learnings from the different writers, from different authors, and apply them in your own in your own working environment, and sometimes test them. Sometimes see. Stephen Covey put the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think by just looking at ourselves to begin with as a basic, and then looking at the vision, the mission, the values of the business, how well we ourselves align, and how well we can get others to align their thoughts, their approach, and really trying to get this balance between the resources, the energy, and the focus and priorities within the business to make it happen the way it's sustainable, so that it makes sure that everybody is actually being the best version of themselves they want to be. We're all different, and I think what's one of the great things, we can all be highly effective in different ways. We can all come to the party and add value, whether we're actually introvert by nature, whether we're extrovert. We can all bring something to the table differently, and that's one of the things I've recently focused a lot on in terms of leadership, which I found very, very useful. I don't know if you're familiar with Lumina Spark.
No.
Lumina Spark is one of the tools out there for modern day leadership. And the Lumina Spark model itself is based upon 8 dimensions, which we actually look, because each and every one of us, whether we're naturally extrovert, there'll be different times we're actually introvert as well. So there's no sort of, from Jung's thinking, there's no way that one pole all the time or the other. The thing about the Lumina Spark model, it actually gives you a personal portrait, which looks at things like whether you're introvert, extrovert, different extremes. It looks at whether you're actually task focused, people focused. As I said, there's different dimensions that you can actually map yourself on, and it looks at you basically in 3 different personas. One is your underlying persona. Your underlying persona is sitting at home, slippers on, totally relaxed, safe environment at home, be yourself, how you behave, how you interact, what your natural manner is, say, fun with friends and family, the dog, everything. Then it comes to what we call your everyday persona. The everyday persona is the image you put across, how you like others to perceive you, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in a social club, a social environment. And you find how you actually act and how you interact on different personas and different there. But equally important, particularly in a leadership in a high risk environment, is what we call the overextended persona. This is how you react when you're under pressure. And by actually studying this and learning more about yourself, it's a great tool. I spent about 40 hours on a course when I was out in South Africa, so we had a lot of time in the evenings. And I spent a lot of time studying this, learned an awful lot just about myself, about my own style, but equally important, about how to be more effective as a quite naturally extrovert person, how to be more effective and get the best and make introverts feel much more acceptable. And equally important, how to feel, how to work and react with somebody who's very much a mirror image of myself. Because sometimes you can be competing, and the fact you're competing can actually make it much more ineffective, particularly in a team environment. So I think there's a lot we can do, particularly in senior management levels. And the good thing about using this one, I mean, there's a lot of good tools out there, there really are. And I've been talking to a lot of good people on this front, because having moved more away from the technical side, this is really, it's really floated the boat for me in terms of how we get people to be more effective, both in terms of mentoring, in terms of leadership, and in terms of coaching. And, you know, this important thing with emotional intelligence is really key. And whilst it varies culture to culture around the world, similar problems there. We've all got gaps. We've all got our actual shortfalls. We don't always see them, other people do sometimes. So the important thing there is that we actually recognise this and try to work to address this. And this is one of the things that this particular tool does.
And is that a free thing, or do you have to pay for it? Or?
Fortunately, I mean, the actual course itself, probably one of the best courses I've invested, didn't come cheap. It came to around £2,000. I got the time to study it because I wanted to use it, and I use it to the full.
Yes.
You can actually do your Lumina Spark portrait by actually going online through Lumina Spark. There are other cheaper options out there.
Yeah.
But for me, with the time I had, this went really into the depth. So I learned an awful lot about myself, and it was great because I was actually working in South Africa along with 3 colleagues.
Yeah.
And all 4 of us undertook the Lumina Spark training at the same time. And it allowed us to actually become more effective, both as individuals, as a team working together.
Yeah.
So,
and were your profiles very different out of interest, albeit you're,
to be honest, you're distinctly different. 2 of the guys we were with were very, very close matched, but me and a bit more of the older statesman, and you know, perhaps having worked in probably more senior international roles, our personas were very different. Our portraits were very different, but there's no right or wrong. It's not a bad thing.
No. Yeah.
Just learning how to interact with each other. So it's really important. And I mean, the guys, I'm one of these. I haven't got a short fuse. I take pressure well, and my overextended persona basically shows I'm cool as a cucumber. Inside, I'm not, but that's the way it comes across, because obviously being controlled, trying to be as logical as possible, try not to overextend in any given sort of direction in terms of the actual profile. But one of the things I do, really, the guys call it venting. If something goes wrong, I might make, oh, bloody hell, look at that silly guy, the way he's parked that car there. Or look at, I might make a comment, and that's my release valve. So I don't let things get to me, I let it go. And at first, the guys used to say to me, well, we thought you were just whinging. But I'll say it, it's just gone. It's just the way, I suppose it's just we've all got different reaction mechanisms. And this is what I've developed over the years. And then it allows you to focus more on the actual positive side of things, on being proactive to come up with the right solutions. But it's one of many great tools out there, and I'm really pleased to see that a lot of organizations that previously, even high-tech organizations, are recognizing the use of some of these psychometric tools in terms of developing themselves as individuals and also developing teams.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of any kind of self-assessment quiz like that, and you can use them for various reasons. You know, there's ones for, as you say, like psychometrics. There's how do you grow your business? We've got something similar for, you know, what's your slip risk profile? You know, so the tech around these is really very clever. But I like the fact that it's interactive and it makes you think, and it feels like you're invested in the outcome. Whereas if someone just calls you up and says, I've observed that you're X, Y, and Z, you're not going to necessarily believe it. Whereas if you've invested the time to answer the questions and think about it, and then that's the answer that comes back, you give a lot more credence to it. And I think that has more impact.
Couldn't agree more, my friend. And the fact you've answered it yourself, you've got to be honest with yourself. If there's anything wrong, that's you yourself. And I said this, the great thing about this psychiatric profile, it's your traits based on 24 qualities. It falls into what we call 8 aspects and 4 archetypes. But when you look at it and get other people, I mean, I'll be quite honest with you, I got my wife to do hers as well. And my wife and I are chalk and cheese. And not a bad thing, because we work well and interact together. And having done the test and gone through some of the stuff with her, she understands my psyche a bit more, the way I work a little bit more. I mean, not so after 35 years, she probably knows me better than anybody, mate. So but the fact, you know, some of the actually really clever using some of the science behind it. And this work for this actual model, like some of the others, was done by psychologists. It was also done by scientists, and it's probably one of the most scientific models that's out there for this type of thing. I mean, a lot of the stuff like 16PF and stuff wasn't actually done by psychologists, and it didn't really initially have the scientific involvement in it. But I got a lot out of that in the past, and nothing but made me more inquisitive to look deeper. So it's great. I mean, that's not the only one. There's some other good stuff out there as well, which is well worth looking at. It's just the one I crossed because of the business I was working with.
Yeah, no, that sounds very good. We'll include a link for that in the show notes of the podcast, both the video and the audio version. So thanks for that, Hugh. So if you're starting then a mentoring relationship with somebody, is that the type of thing you'd suggest that they do to kind of get that benchmark for where they're at?
To be honest with you, as you probably know, I was one of the first mentors that basically was on the pilot scheme with WISM a few years ago. And after that, I've been involved mentoring informally through work for a long time, mentoring and coaching. One of the things that actually encouraged me to do it outside of work was the problem is if you're in a sort of coaching role at work, the problem is sometimes you're developing that person and shaping them into being something that the organisation needs rather than what they want to be.
Yeah.
And one of my most esteemed friends, who was really successful safety professional, worked for me in India. I developed a great relationship with the guy. Won't mention any names, but he actually said to me one day out of the blue, we've got a lot of trust and respect, a lot of honesty with each other. He said to me, can I be brutally honest with you? I said, yeah, of course you can. I thought he was going to say, your mention's not working. He says, no, I do health and safety. I said, what? I said, you're great at it. I said, what do you want to do? He wanted to be a traditional Indian singer, which to us in the West sounds a bit crazy, but family heritage, his grandfather, his father, grandfather, all had gone back. And this was really what really motivated him. He was fortunate his wife had a good job at the bank. So I was actually mentoring somebody out of, or coaching somebody out of a job. And fortunately, we had a plan B. We had a great guy who came in and developed in the role. But I think that sometimes it's nice to have that dissociation from the workplace to allow people to develop the way they want to develop. And for years, so I did it using some frameworks. Again, I did deeper on this. I've looked at things like European EMCC, European Mentoring and Coaching Council tools in terms of your behaviours, in terms of integrity, trust, honesty. And I've tried to use that and adopt that whether I'm mentoring somebody informally out of work or somebody who's just got in touch with me through LinkedIn or somebody who I'm doing either through WISM or IOS. So I think it's important that you give a fair grounding. You're not there to give them the answers. You're there for them to feel their way. The first thing I tend to try to do is actually say to them, one of the things I say to mentoring coaching, Christian, is the fact that before we start talking, what do you want to get out of this? Take a week or two sometimes to go back and reflect. And when I say what do you want to get out of it, I want you to think about 3 scenarios. What do you want to get out of this technically in terms of personal development? It's additional skills, training, whatever. What do you want to get out of this professionally in terms of your role, company you work for, how you're respected within the industry you're in? But equally important and possibly more important is the work-life balance.
Yeah.
How are you going to adopt this? How are you going to basically make sure that whatever you're doing there in terms of your plan covers and allows you to give enough bandwidth so that your family doesn't suffer? Because I've seen people in the past, real high flyers in businesses, who've done really, really well at the cost of a marriage, at cost of a relationship. And having spoken to these guys and girls, sometimes one-on-one, confidentially, they've actually turned around to me and say, yeah, I'm a multi-millionaire, yeah, I've done this. What I wouldn't give it to be able to take the clock back and give my family the time they wanted. I think particularly after COVID and how people become much more risk averse, people are recognising the importance of getting this sort of triple balance right. So that's one of the things I always say to people. Let's think about what you want, and let's think about what you want and what you've got to give for your family's needs as well.
So how many people have you kind of mentored or coached over the years?
I hate to think, mate, honestly. But honestly, hundreds. Seriously, hundreds, honestly, yeah.
And some
have been like a quick fix, like, for example, someone's wanting to move, sort of help and support getting their fellowship of IOS or WISM or chartered membership or a certain specific thing they wanted help with. Whereas there's others who have a long-term relationship, so we probably talk 2 or 3 times a year. If they change roles or the specific support they want to bounce things off with me, then they'll do that. So it's some of these things, and I try. I mean, I try and leave myself. I'm trying to be honest. I try to do between 20 to 30 hours a month mentoring. I don't play rugby anymore. The knees are well gone. So seriously, a big part of me is actually trying to give back and trying to pay back by helping others. But one of the biggest problems is sometimes is the fact that, if you are a mentor, you're a sounding board, you're to work with them, you try and help them to formulate their own opinions. You can't answer things for them. So, it's important that you let people reflect and let people think themselves. And I think sometimes the danger is people think that you're going to come into it and you're going to give them all the answers they want.
Yeah.
It's wrong and both professionally and ethical to do that. So sometimes the first thing you do is throw more questions at them rather than answers, then build up something of a mini SWOT. Then where are they now? Where they want to be in 12 months' time, 2 years' time, 3 to 5 years' time, longer term? What's their ambitions in all of these 3 dimensions? And let's play it from there. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So let's try and put together a piecemeal plan, and let's try and see who we've got in terms of internal stakeholders, who we've got in terms of external stakeholders we'll need to work with to try and achieve these things. And let's try and monitor. Now, it doesn't always work to plan, Christian, right? You'd be amazed how many times people have gone really great guns, then they've decided, like the Indian traditional singer, I want to change direction. And they change direction. So I always say to these people, always have a plan B. And don't see failure to achieve what you want to achieve. And again, it's back to the old saying about the grass is always greener. Sometimes people get to where they think they want it to be, and it's not quite what they perceived it to be. So that's when we refocus, realign. So, well, hang on, let's step back one and say, where in this journey did things start sort of not really working and resonating for you? Let's go back to there and let's see what our alternatives are from there. I want to say it's the royal we. I basically let them decide for themselves, but let them know they've got the support there, and I'm a sounding board. I'm there to try and share sort of 40 years experience in this. Because where I got to today, I promise you, you don't get a haircut like this, without a rough path on the way, mate.
And this kind of interest and passion for mentoring, is that driven by experience of your own when you were getting started and someone or other people were mentoring you and that kind of inspired you, or is it just something that's kind of come to you as you progress in your career?
I'm so pleased you asked this one, because it's quite funny, because looking back in hindsight, mentoring and coaching in the 80s and 90s weren't so common.
No.
And I'd left university with a degree in chemistry, met my wife about a month. In fact, it's a good story. I love this one. I played rugby on Valentine's Day, right? February the 14th, 1988 was the last time I played rugby. I tore my knee. I did a lot of damage to it, had a few operations on it. I got a card via my brother on the Sunday, on the 15th, saying my wife would like to go out for a drink with me. So my wife took me out on our first date. I was on crutches, and she walked me home. And it's been downhill ever since. No, it hasn't, mate. It's been far from it. It's been wonderful. But there must have been something there. But I'm quite sure at the time, I spent sort of 12, 15 months. I came out as a chemist, moved into a chief chemist role, learned the chemistry I had been doing at university and loving wasn't the same in reality. It was much more sort of, I wouldn't say bucket chemistry, much more repetitive stuff. I wasn't using my brain.
Yeah. And
then had the opportunity to move into a 3-shift role. Everybody else was trying to get off 3 shifts. So I jumped onto 3 shifts to learn more about the processes, the products, the materials. And unbeknown to me, I was under the wing of a guy by the name of Brian Llewellyn, who was basically brought in as overall as quality manager. And because I was actually more of a quality control function then, he was the one who pushed me to do night school. I went to night school and did operations management, strategic management, and took a lot more interest in the people there. And he didn't hard-nose coach or mentor me, but he was very supportive. He didn't tell me I had to do anything, but he strongly suggested, he said, son, it's going to be good for you longer term. Really grassroots, down-to-earth guy who I owe a lot to, because in many respects, I think he probably helped me to grow up that bit earlier and recognise the importance. And really, it was after that, I've always tried to encourage people around me to try and be the best version of themselves they want to be, not what everybody else wants them to be. So, and similarly, I try and treat people the way they want to be treated, not the way I think they should treat them. So I think it's an important thing that came out early days, the fact that somebody had helped me pay it forward. I think that's where you get the responsibility. And something like your good self, it becomes part of your nature then. You look to try and help people to get to the next stage. So
good. Just wondered if there's and it sounds like that was a kind of informal mentor relationship that you mentioned. So there is something there in a kind of origin story sense.
Yeah, and then when I first moved into an international role with Fasika International, I was also fortunate that it's quite ironic, because I'm a Rangers fan, Glasgow Rangers. I'm actually Scottish by birth, and despite the fact I'm a big fan of Rangers, I like to see them do well. They're not doing so well now. For some reason, all the guys I seem to align with and make mates with are Celtic fans.
Right.
It just seems to, and obviously so we have friendly banter, never nasty banter, always good friendly banter. And ironically, one of the best mentors I had as well when I moved into the international role was a guy by the name of Dr. Gary Miller, the Doctor of Chemistry from ICI. Again, Celtic fan, as I said to you. So as well as having that rapport and that sort of mutual respect for each other, he was good as well, because he helped really around the early 2000s, really got me thinking much more about how you have to behave, how you have to be more effective, particularly in an internationally, culturally sensitive environment. And again, back to as you said earlier about the fact people see us and see our accident performance as being world class. They think that we're going to go out there. The things I've always instilled in my team and my kids and everybody, whenever we're actually overseas, we're not just representing ourselves and our families. We're representing our companies. We're representing our country. And the worst we portray is going to leave a lasting impression on the people we're with. So again, I'd sooner go out there and leave a positive impact, basically so people think next time they come along, those British guys or the British ladies aren't so bad. I think the important thing is showing them that we've got, yes, we may be in a little stronger position in some of this accident performance, but we've still got humility. We know we're not the finished article. And we know even a lot, one of the good things about internationally, whether it's in India, Africa, every day's a school day, Christian. Nobody's any smarter than anybody else. They think differently. China, I learned so much off the Chinese people. Every trip to China, I went there for many years. I'd always come back fascinated learning something. And Indians, Chinese, we all think differently. There's no right or wrong way. We come up to the same solution, and it's great to actually work with these people because it changes your own perception, changes your mindset.
Yeah, I did languages at university, and I remember as a kid going to Germany on a exchange for like a week, and I came back, and lots of not one person but a few people in my sort of local village sort of started asking me questions about like, what are people like in Germany, and my response was, well, they're just like they are here, like everyone's nice and normal people. They just speak a different language. And it's funny how people sometimes have these perceptions of different cultures and countries, that everyone's so different. But I think we do have different customs and ways of thinking, as you say, but fundamentally we're all people at the end of the day, and we can all get on and, as you said earlier, align behind. That's why safety is so great, right? Because everyone can align behind that, because viscerally you understand it's important.
Very much so, and I'm glad you brought up the fact about German. My best mate's a German. His name's Walter Lizzle. He's 10 years older than me, and we refer to each other as brother. And you mentioned about your experience in Germany. Well, I was looking after a plant in Bonnybridge in Scotland, and there was a business sale going on. So my son and his friend were originally going to do their work experience there. It fell through. Unfortunately for me, but fortunately for my son and his mate, my best friend Walter had him stay at his house for over a week. He did his work experience in Borken in Germany with the team there. And it's surprising because people see the Germans as being much more regimental and stricter. Well, my son was like 14, coming on 15. Never been a big drinker anyway. And I said to my mates, look, please, Walter, just watch him. Watch the kids, because you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. He said, Hugh, don't worry. Nobody has taken more than a mile than my son Dominic, who was a few years older. So I was there. I was doing actually a workshop at the same time. They were in a big factory, another place. I went to Walter's house on the evening. My son's in the garden with his friends, sitting there drinking beer and soda. He'd never had a beer at home. And I thought, oh no. Anyway, I said, Walter says, they don't used to drink. He says, but here in Germany, he says, it's quite common that the kids can have a beer. I mean, not excessive, just had a beer.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next day he got up and he says, those boys wouldn't get out of bed. said, what will do? It was you who was feeding them beer, mate. It was your problem, not mine. Because I hadn't been used to it. But they had, honestly, even now, my son Andrew's moved into safety, as you know, with Safety Forward, and Marissa and the team they're a great team. Even now, he'll talk and still keeps in touch with Walter and about what a great experience the work experience was. And it's surprising, you said, because I think younger people interacting, they got a few students there. And whilst my son and James Ward, his friend, were a couple of years younger than students, they naturally bonded together.
Yeah.
Talking about common things like computer games and different things. And honestly, it couldn't have been a better experience for me. And, I think he's mentioned about, all people being different. I think one of the great things that we could do to try and break down some of these barriers would to have this interaction, this exchange. We had it many years ago. When I was at school, we had school exchanges, but not many people took upon it. So I think it would teach us all a lot more about each other and get people to accept a lot more different cultures.
Yeah, definitely agree with that, and also get languages back on the curriculum with more prominence as well. But we'll leave the new government to try and sort out the education system.
Yes, well, it's quite funny because my daughter's always been very linguistic. She loved it. She's a school teacher. She teaches industrial design technology, and she's not really any plans to have any children. But as you're aware, I was grandfather 16 months ago, so I'm quite fortunate because my son's partner Ingrid is from Lithuania, so we've got a 16-month-old William who's staying with us at the moment while they buy their house, who's speaking both English, and then as of next weekend is back in Lithuania for 2 weeks to see his other grandma, and he'll be speaking. So it's great because I'm a big believer in the earlier we can teach the kids the languages, the better. And he gets you to think in that language as well, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good segue into talking about younger people, and specifically younger people in our safety world. You mentioned about that kind of hunger that you'd identified, particularly from people overseas. But how else would you kind of identify differences between, shall we say, the traditional male, pale and stale safety professional and this kind of new generation? And what do we need to learn about them, appreciate about them, support them with? Because obviously, if we want to get over that stagnation that we talked about right at the start, they're the ones that are going to be delivering this over the coming years.
Very much so, my friend. I think the big thing is their expectations and their mindset's totally different. I mean, I've been recently talking to former colleagues from one of the companies I work with, and some of these people have been there 20, 30 years. In fact, I myself was with one company in different shapes for 31 years. Nowadays, those opportunities aren't there. People are going to stay with the company for 2-3 years maximum, but in that time, they want success, they want progression. Whereas in our day and age, it was more a case you'd wait till the opportunity came. These people are going to go out there. These people are hungry, they're dynamic. They not only do they want the recognition, but they want to make a positive difference. So I see this as a positive enabler, as a positive driver for safety. As long as we share knowledge with them so that they can learn from what mistakes were made before. Obviously, we all have to make mistakes. It's a key part of learning. But if we can fast track them, and in particularly, the big thing that impresses me, they're all IT gurus compared to our generation. They'll dab hand everybody. I mean, every guy, you look at them on the shop floor now, people say, I can't use the technology. Everybody's got an iPhone or smartphone. Everybody can do different. And I'm not, so it's important we utilize these new people skills within the workplace. And this is where I think important. These are the people who are going to drive the change. These are the people who we need to be listening to, working with, accepting, using them, and developing them to enable the older workforce to see that technology, AI, is not a threat. If anything, if we use it wisely and use it correctly, it can make the workplaces safer. Now, this shouldn't be the cue for us to develop strong complacency, to take the focus off risk, because technology, droids, drones, or whatever are going to do it for us. The important thing is to realise that we still have to behave in a safe manner. We still have to have a fundamental engagement and make sure that things are safe. We all have to speak up if things aren't. But I think there's a big fear at the moment still that, I don't know, sort of Robocop's coming, the generation's coming where we'll be replaced. I don't really see that. I think that our roles will change significantly. I can't see people being replaced. if anything, particularly when it comes to things like musculoskeletal disorders, hopefully some of the technology is going to basically help improve the quality of people's life.
Yeah.
In the workplace, less injuries. And again, we were talking before last week when you and I had a brief conversation, how we can make best use of some of this technology, particularly when it comes to slip testing or predictive technology, so that people actually apply the technology before taking the risk or before exposing themselves to the risk. I think there's so many opportunities out there in a whole host of injuries. And I think one of the most important things is let these people carry on moving from different areas to find themselves the fit and get the right success. I mean, you look at the amount of entrepreneurs that are coming through now, youngsters who are being successful in businesses because they've got the passion, the drive, the hunger. We shouldn't discourage this. We should be promoting this, and we should be using these people to actually encourage others and to encourage this advancement. I really think so. And the important thing is, obviously, in society, they've got parents, they've got grandparents. Don't shoot us old codgers just yet. Learn from our learnings, learn from where we've made mistakes before, but try and build on what we actually have. Like every generation, build on our knowledge, build on what we've tried to achieve, share the lessons learned, take things to the next level.
Yeah, perfect. And that's a lovely way to finish the conversation. I think that's a lovely summary of here's the opportunities, but let's not forget that we've got all this experience and let's leverage it.
Thanks for that, Christian. I thought you were going to say, we'll shoot the old codger Maxwell.
No, definitely not. Hugh, where can people find out more about you? Where could they contact you if they want to have a chat with you? Maybe, I don't know if you've got any spaces, any more mentoring, but have a chat with you about that sort of thing, for example.
To be honest, till about the end of September, I'm pretty chocker at the moment. Got a few people I'm working on with different commitments to why I should do some things. But please, or direct email me, hjmaxwell63@gmail.com. If I'm traveling away, I may not get back straight away, but I'll definitely get back within 24, 48 hours maximum. And whilst I may not have the answer, I'm pretty fortunate. I've got quite a wide network with people like your good self, Christian. I'm typically going to know somebody who I can point in the right direction, who can hopefully resolve whatever issues they may have. So very best of luck. And a great opportunity to actually exchange this with you, and let's hope, we carry on making best use of technologies. You keep up this great work, Christian. Really appreciate it.
I'll do my best, Hugh. Thank you. Thanks very much for joining today. And thanks to you for joining Hugh and I on this episode, and we'll see you again on the next one. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.